Hi, I'm Katie Crane, and this is the Pilates Lounge. Hi everyone, my name's Katie Crane. I'm the Pilates professional. Welcome to another episode of the Pilates Lounge Podcast. Hey, we just had the Australian Pilates Association conference in Sydney last week. If I saw you there, thank you so much for reaching out and introducing yourself and letting me know how much you value the podcast. To tell you the truth, it is thanks to you that I'm sitting here right now bringing another episode to you. Life has been busy. I'm not going to lie. Life has been so busy that for a little while, the podcast has been set aside. I'm one of those people who really wants to do things well. I don't like just dipping my toe in the water. I'm like, if there's a blue puddle over there, I'm going to swim in that puddle. I really want to jump all in when I do something. And for the last couple of months, I really have not been able to do that with the podcast. So first of all, I want to say thank you for sticking around. Some of you said that you just went back and listened to old episodes and that you gained even more insight into listening to the episode more than once. So if you're one of those people, yay, thank you. I'm so thrilled that you're getting so much out of these episodes. And if you have not yet gone back and listened to a couple of your old favorites, maybe now's the time to do it. But I am back. I'm making a concerted effort to put aside time so that I can continue to bring you these episodes. Going to the Pilates conference the other week, it really resonated with me, the importance of community, of our community as Pilates practitioners, as Pilates professionals. We stand alone, we stand aside from, and we stand independently from the fitness fraternity. We are not reformer studios. We are not gyms. We are not the YMCA, or we are not a hotel or a resort just offering Pilates classes on the side. We are Pilates professionals, and it is so important that as Pilates professionals, we do whatever the damn we can to uphold, to elevate, to maintain and sustain this profession. I was privy to sitting in on a few of the workshops that were presented at the Pilates Association conference. And let me tell you, my heart left there completely full. Not only was my heart full because I got to see some of our nation's best stand up and present workshops on subjects and topics that they have obviously worked really hard at learning so that then they could share it with the rest of us. But we really are a niche market. And what I mean by a niche market is we don't stand with a whole bunch of watered down excuses for Pilates. We're not just exercising on reformers. We're not just putting a gym class together and adding in the hundreds thinking that that can be Pilates. We really are experts in our field, and there are many experts in the Pilates field. When I looked around at the Pilates conference, I realized that I was standing in a room with giants. Some of the things that were being talked about, some of the topics that were being delved in so deeply, I felt like I could have been at physiotherapy conference, only it was more fun. I felt like I was really at something that was so special and with people who have such a wealth of knowledge. And not only do they have knowledge, but there was true passion for the work that we do. So a big shout out to everybody who presented, of course, to the PAA, to the Pilates Association of Australia, which is primarily volunteers, which is primarily put together by people who just want to sustain our industry. Thank you to all of you who do the work that you do. And thank you for bringing a couple of overseas presenters. It's always great to get a feel for what's happening in the Pilates world all over the world and getting us all together in one great space. And that, like I said, that's really what brings me back here, is recognizing the importance of what it is that I'm doing here. You know, the whole point of this podcast has always to give back to you. If you did not go to the Pilates Association conference, put it on your radar. It normally is every 2 years. Put it on your radar. No matter where you are in your Pilates journey, your people are there at the conference like nothing else. But today's topic, moving right along, so I don't keep going on because I know that I'm really good at having a little rant. But moving right along, today I want to talk bursitis. I remember when I first started seeing people with bursitis and I was like, oh my gosh, I don't know what to do with these people, because I felt like everything that I did, or too many things of what I did, seemed to exacerbate the problem. And I started to feel like maybe I am part of the problem. But the more that I understood bursitis, the more I realized that actually Pilates is key in helping people overcome this issue. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what bursitis is, and one of my bugbears, or something that is really common, like a way that people seem to try and tackle bursitis that I don't think is really doing anybody any favors, or a lot of the time it doesn't do the person favors, because when people choose this as one of, I guess, what they think of as a healing modality, or they're trying to overcome their bursitis, then people are not being educated as to what it is that they're entering into and the importance of then having to complete the entire plan. But first, let's get into what bursitis is. Basically, your bursa are like little sacs of fluid, right? So a bursa is a tiny fluid-filled sac. We've got them dotted all around our body, but in particular, the bursa are in our big joints. So think our shoulders, our hips, our knees, our elbows, and our heels. We have these little sacs of fluid that are designed to reduce friction of the bones within the joint. So I guess they kind of act like little cushions or gliding pads between the bones, tendons, and ligaments. If I think about a joint that is performing its job really well, let's say a healthy joint, I imagine that there is space in that joint. And I know that in reality, there is no space in the body. Every single space in the body is, in fact, filled up. It's filled up with muscles, nerves, tendons, ligaments, blood vessels, adipose tissue or fat, lymph. Every single bit of the body is full. It's not like you could open your body up like a packet of Sandboy chips and have all of the air that you have in the packet of chips these days. Your body is full. But your body, when mechanically working well, should have space between the bones. So I want you to imagine, for example, let's go through like the shoulder. Imagine your shoulder joint, for example. Part of that shoulder, the joint of your shoulder, is made up partly of your clavicle or your collarbone, and then the joint or the bone of your arm. And when the bone of your arm sits in the space underneath your collarbone or clavicle, then everything is happy, right? When I talk about space, what I'm talking about is that your collarbone and the bone of your arm does not connect at all. So when you reach your arm to the ceiling, then there is space in that joint. So imagine your clavicle, if you put your hands on your collarbones, is at the front of your chest, at the front of your shoulders, I suppose. And your humerus, which is your arm bone, it actually just slides in underneath or sits in underneath your clavicle. Those two bones actually work cohesively with your scapula as well. So your scapula is at the back of your shoulder and it slides or rests against your rib cage. When those things are working cohesively, your clavicle, your scapula, and your humerus, then the joint of your shoulder, which is known as your rotator cuff, or in America they say rotor cuff, your rotor cuff allows that, or those three parts, those three bones, allow for you to take your arm up to the ceiling, take your arm out to a T, take your arm down to your side, and even reach your arm behind your body. Ultimately, your humerus, the top of your humerus, is a circle. And all of our joints, all of our major joints are circular, so your arm can rotate, which is why we call it the rotor cuff or the rotator cuff. Your arm can rotate within the cuff that your clavicle and scapula create for the humerus. But when there is no space within those bursa, those little sac-filled bubbles or those little bursas of fluid, they become inflamed simply because the bone is pushing against that bursa and then it becomes inflamed. So imagine if you just kept scratching your wrist all day long. Say you've got a mosquito bite and you keep scratching that. Instead of just letting it be, you just keep scratching, scratch. Imagine what happens to that mosquito bite if you just continue to scratch it. It's going to become red and inflamed and swollen. So this is exactly what happens when the bones are not working cohesively together, or there's not good rhythm in those bones, or I think of joint placement, there's not correct joint placement of those bones, then the bursa or those tiny fluid-filled sacs just keep getting rubbed against and they actually become inflamed. And then that is called bursitis. So ultimately, what we're looking at when we're talking about bursitis is poor mechanics. And mechanics is what Pilates is all about. Good mechanics, correct joint placement, good movement is what Pilates practitioners are superstars at. So if somebody's got bursitis, what they need to be doing is Pilates. But let's remember, not all Pilates is equal. So they don't necessarily need to be going to a reformer class. They definitely do not need to be going to a reformer fitness class. They don't necessarily need to be going to a mat class. They definitely don't need to be going to a mat class that is not taught by you, by a Pilates professional. What people with bursitis need is that eye to detail, that one-on-one attention, the individualized approach that Pilates is really excellent at offering. Because when we move well, you don't even know that your bursa exists. When your joints are in correct placement, when you're moving, you have no idea that you even have bursa. And you have no idea you've got bursa because everything is working just the way that it's designed to. But those bursa become inflamed, from too much load, repetitive motion, poor mechanics, and sometimes trauma. So you may end up with an inflamed bursa. Say if you're riding your push bike and you fell off of your push bike and on your shoulder, or if you tripped over and fell on the side of your hip, you've got bursa in the hip joint as well. So that may inflame the bursa. But ultimately, it's not necessarily the initial trauma that's going to cause this. You've had a traumatic event. So maybe you've fallen off your bike, fallen off your horse, come off your motorbike, whatever it is, fallen over on your hip. And because you've traumatized that joint in general, so maybe the muscles are bruised, maybe you've torn a ligament, or maybe you've caused some inflammation in that area in general, and then your mechanics change because you're in pain, so you start using that arm differently, you start using that leg differently, your gait changes, the way that you're walking changes, the way that you're moving changes, so you start performing your movement with poor mechanics, then you end up with bursitis in general, right? So it's an inflammatory response to poor mechanics. So some classic examples of bursitis would be shoulder bursitis. So people who might end up with shoulder bursitis could be swimmers who are not swimming well. So maybe they haven't been coached to how to swim well. They're performing their over crawl or their freestyle. And every time they're doing that, because they have poor mechanics in that rotor cuff, in the clavicular, humeral, scapular arrangement, they have poor shoulder organization, then there's this pressing into the bursa over and over again from the overhead swim. They end up with bursitis. A tennis player who is performing an overhead serve with poor mechanics can end up with shoulder bursitis. Think sparkies, electricians, motor mechanics. They're doing repetitive work with their arms overhead, can end up with bursitis if they've got poor mechanics. If we think hip bursitis, we see hip bursitis a lot actually. That can happen from people who are sitting a lot all the time, and then they suddenly decide to go for a long walk or run 10Ks. They've gone from a sitting position to an upwards position, and off they go without warming up the body, without making sure that all of their muscles are warmed up and performing well, and ultimately they're walking or running with poor mechanics. We see a lot where I live, a lot of people love to bushwalk, and part of our bread and butter comes from specifically women who decide to go on a big bushwalk, maybe for a half a day or a couple of days, and they come back with hip bursitis. Ultimately, it's poor mechanics when they're walking. And poor mechanics often can come down to not enough strength in the hip extensors when you're walking, not enough mobility in the hip joint in general, or too much mobility in the hip joint. Then those bones are rubbing against the bursa and it causes bursitis. Knee bursitis is another common one, can come from repetitive kneeling or sudden overload. So again, could be your hikers, they go for a hike, they're having to hike down a hill for an extended period or up a hill for an extended period, and because of poor mechanics, because the bones are not working well, they're not in good placement, they end up with bursitis. Knee bursitis we see a little bit with water skiers as well. You might see it in surfers, people who are surfing but they've got poor mechanics, praying too much maybe, I don't know. No, just joking. I don't think that many people pray on their knees these days. Anything that is going to be putting excessive overload on the knee, potentially people who are doing heavy load at the gym, like their, what are those things called with the big bells, like their snatch and grab and stuff, and they're not practicing good mechanics in their deep squat, can end up with knee bursitis. They're just some common things, right? My husband actually ended up with elbow bursitis. He hit his elbow, we'd wakeboard, and he hit his elbow really hard on the jet ski as he was coming off of the jet ski. So it can happen from that excessive trauma, but then after that, he kept water skiing for the day. So then he kept using that arm over and over again. So it had already gotten inflamed, like the joint had gotten inflamed because he had this traumatic force very quickly from a height. He fell quite high onto his elbow and then kept water skiing because he didn't want to miss out on the fun. End up with elbow bursitis. It took quite a while for him to get over it. So what does bursitis feel like, or how does it present? It presents as pain, swelling, sometimes heat in the joint, and often a real sense of stiffness in the joint. So a client with bursitis might say things like, it just feels really thick in my joint, or I can't move the way I used to without it really biting. So somebody might say, I can reach my arm forwards, but as I start to any time above the shoulder, and it really hurts. So I can't reach up to the washing line, up to the clothesline to take clothes off, or I can't throw my towel over the door anymore, or, I can't do my overhead hand serve at tennis. I've got to serve underarm. And if I'm serving underarm, I'm okay, but I can't serve overarm. People with hip bursitis will tell you that they can't lay on that side. It hurts to lay on that side. It may feel a little bit with a cushion underneath the hip. So that's one of the things that we can do to help people with bursitis, is cushion them up a little bit. But it hurts to put any type of force on that joint when the bursa is inflamed. So this is the whole deal, and this is where I think Pilates really gives us a huge advantage as movement educators, because we're trained to notice these patterns. When we see a client who keeps hitching their hip or collapsing their shoulder or loading asymmetrically, that's a prelude to bursitis, or they're doing that because they've got bursitis. They've already got poor mechanics. So bursitis is often just the body's way of saying, this is too much, or you're doing this too often, or this is not the right direction, or you're doing this too much too often in this one direction, or this is not how this joint is meant to move. So the deal with bursitis is it is a symptom of poor patterning. The bursitis is not the problem. And this is where I really have a bugbear with the conversation that people might have with somebody else that they'll go see. Let's say it's a GP or somebody else who's going to... So many people who are not Pilates professionals look at things that happen in the body as the problem. Whatever is happening in the body is not the problem. It doesn't matter whether it's bursitis, a disc issue, whether it's cancer. These issues that we're having in the body are messengers to tell us that we've got to do something differently. This is where Pilates comes in. So one thing that seems to be this what is it? Like what's given to people with bursitis, almost as like, well, this is going to fix your issue kind of thinking. And it's actually only slowing down the problem and then potentially causing more issues, is a cortisone injection. I cannot tell you how many people I've worked with over the years who are like, oh yeah, well, I had a problem in my shoulder or in my hip, in my knee or my elbow, wherever. My doctor just told me get a cortisone injection. My first question is to that person, do you know what a cortisone injection is? Well, yeah, it's going to relieve the pain. That's what people say. Yeah, well, it's cortisol. It's going to relieve the pain. Okay, well, you probably don't really know exactly what the cortisone injection is. And then I ask the person who gave you that cortisone injection, what is the bigger plan for you? So after you've been given that cortisone injection, or maybe you're just deciding whether or not you're going to get the cortisone injection, then what happens next? What is the rehabilitation plan? I can easily tell you that 99.7% of the time, the rehabilitation plan is nil. There is no plan after the cortisone injection. And this is my bugbear. So this is what I recommend to any of my clients who are even considering getting a cortisone injection. And I'm not like, no, you can't get that injection. Don't you dare get that injection. That's not my place. But I am very, very clear with people. I understand that if you get a cortisone injection, you have a 70% chance of that cortisone injection being effective. So, A, you need to be willing to be the 30 to 40% of people that it's not going to work for. You don't know that until you get that done, and that's fine. So just know that it may not work for you. B, if the cortisone injection works for you, and then all of a sudden you have a reduced level of pain, that doesn't mean that the bursitis has gone away. What it means is that now you have a period of months to be able to fix the mechanical issue of that joint. So now you need to be coming to Pilates so that I can teach you better mechanics, so that once that cortisol has worn off, you're not back to where you started, because there's no point having a cortisol injection and then doing nothing and thinking that that is the be all and end all. If you are successful, if your body takes a cortisol successfully and you have that reduced pain, this is an opportunity for you to change what's happening in your body so that you can avoid this issue happening again. Because a cortisone injection is serious, right? Now, let me tell you a little bit about it, just in case you don't know. Cortisone injection is a synthetic corticosteroid. So it's made from using part of the hormone. So we have a hormone in our body called cortisol that we naturally produce. The hormone cortisol is naturally produced. It's our stress hormone. So it is naturally produced for us to deal with stress. That's very important to know. We are all producing cortisone, right? Cortisol is what wakes us up in the morning. It's really, really important hormone in our body. But we can produce too much cortisone, or our body continues to produce cortisone when we are under stress. So that stress can be physical, emotional, mental. The brain doesn't know the difference. All it knows is that we're under stress, and it will continue to produce cortisol. People who do not respond to a cortisone injection normally do not respond because their body has already tapped out their natural reserves of cortisol. That's right. So if you imagine, this is completely imaginary, right? Just for you to understand cortisol a little bit. Imagine that your body produces cortisol, and that cortisol is kept in a cup in your body. And your body can only produce the cortisol that could fill that cup to the brim, and then your body will no longer respond to the cortisol that your body is producing. This is what's happened when somebody has a cortisone injection and it doesn't work for them. It means that their own natural reserves of cortisone is already tapped out, which means that they have been under a heck of a lot of stress, often for a long period of time. And so giving that person more cortisol, a cortisone injection, is actually detrimental to their long-term health. So it's a synthetic corticosteroid, right? I've already told you that. Your cortisol is produced naturally in the adrenal glands. So everybody knows adrenal glands produce the stress hormones. Well, if you don't, then now you do. So these are like little hats that sit right on top of your kidneys. Now, when you get a cortisone injection, the syringe delivers a very concentrated dose of steroid directly into the bursa or around the inflamed area. Because cortisol, let's say if you have pain in the body, your brain or your body in general perceives that pain as stress. And so your body is already going to produce its own cortisol. Your body produces cortisol when you've hurt yourself, and it's actually the very first part of your inflammatory response. So it shuts the steroid, the inflammatory signaling pathways, and then the pain signals calm down. Your swelling decreases, and then movement feels easier. When your body naturally produces cortisol, it's actually the first part of your inflammatory response. It's your body's natural way of causing a slight inflammation in the area, which then brings blood into the area, brings oxygen into the area, brings brand new blood cells so that healing can start. But when you get a shot of cortisone, then it's like a very concentrated dose, and it almost has like the opposite effect. So the pain signals calm down. It is designed to allow for the swelling to decrease so that then movement feels easier. But the deal is, it doesn't do anything for the mechanics of the joint. It doesn't improve the way that you are moving. And I know that it sounds good because pain is horrendous. Pain is psychologically and emotionally debilitating. And if any of you have suffered from pain, you know that you kind of get to a certain point where you can't take it anymore. So I'm not anti-steroid. I'm not anti-cortisol injection. I am just, what bugs me is that people are not educated, A, on what is happening when they take that steroid, and B, what they need to do then for the whole experience to be successful. Because here's the deal. The artificial flood of steroid, it doesn't just target the inflamed tissue, like it actually disrupts the natural collagen and tendon structure around it. So it actually, because it's catabolic, cortisone is catabolic, which means that it breaks down tissue. That's its job. So because you get like this flood of cortisol in that area, or cortisone, synthetic cortisol, it actually thins out the cartilage, it tethers tendons, or it weakens tendons, and can literally tether or fray the attachment points of that joint. And this is why we see tendon ruptures or worsening instability after multiple shots. I've actually never, ever, ever in my 18 years of teaching, and I ask a lot of questions to my clients and always have, partly because I'm a bit of a curious cat and I like to know what's going on. I've never in my entire career known of a client letting me know that they're aware that when they're given a cortisone injection, they are aware that it's actually damaging that area, that it's actually tethering the tendons. I bet that if people understood that it's going to fray the attachment points, that it's going to weaken the cartilage, then not many people would be getting cortisone injections, I can tell you that. And I think that it's absolutely disastrous that doctors and whoever's giving the cortisone injection does not give their patients the truth, does not give them the full picture. It seems to me like people who are receiving cortisone injections and people who are giving cortisone injections are looking for a quick fix. They're actually not even concerned about the long-term ramifications or the long-term necessary plan that has to be put in place for this person. Now, I know, before you get all huffy and puffy with me, yes, a doctor is meant to limit people to 3 injections per year per joint. And even that is debated in literature. But the deal is, I've never heard of a patient knowing, even if their doctor has said, I can only do this 3 times a year, right? No patient or no client, I don't call my clients patients because I'm not a doctor, but no client ever comes to me knowing why they can only have 3 injections a year. And I know I have many clients who do have more than 3 injections a year. And I've had multiple clients who have had more than 3 injections a year and in different parts of the body. So in their shoulder, in their knee, in their hip, and it's as if like, well, it doesn't really matter because, different part of the body. Well, guess what? This is the same body. So when you put an injection into that site, yes, maybe it's just going to tether those tendons. But if you keep pushing more cortisol into the body, that does not help with the natural stress response that the body has to try and learn to deal with. Because what happens when people, so imagine you've been stressed out for a long period of time. We talk about your adrenals being tapped out. So your adrenal glands are tapped out. You can no longer naturally produce the amount of cortisol that you need in your body to be able to deal with everyday stresses. You end up with things like chronic fatigue. You're more susceptible to pneumonia, you're not more susceptible to virus in general, and you're more susceptible to other diseases and more susceptible to other injuries. If your body is so tapped out that because you can't deal with daily stress, you're in big trouble. You're in big trouble, my friend. So how on earth can we be injecting people with a steroid over and over and over again and pretending that it's only ever going to affect the site of where that pain is. So yeah, sure, it's a quick fix. A lot of people do get immediate relief and for a few months, sustainable relief from the cortisone injection. And by the time you end up with the cortisone injection, you are at your wit's end. Although some people are pretty blasé. I've also seen some people like within a couple of weeks go and get a cortisone injection, which is completely ludicrous. And those people, they're the type of people who they actually don't want to take responsibility for their own health and for their own body. Their entire life, they're looking for a quick fix. But I do understand if you're working with a client who has had pain for months, who has trying to be doing all the right things, who cannot sleep, who is debilitated by the pain, then yes, a cortisol steroid injection or a cortisone steroid injection can really help set them on the pathway to recovery because it takes away the pain and then they can start focusing on what's going on. But we must absolutely remember that the bursitis is not the root cause. The bursitis is a symptom for other problems. And it's up to us as problem solvers, as Pilates professionals, to help our clients fix the issue. So let's have a little bit of a chat about natural cortisol versus synthetic cortisol, which I've already said a little bit. So I've already said to you, let you know that it's the stress hormone, wakes us up in the morning. So it's part of our natural circadian rhythm. So cortisol is the circadian rhythm in the morning that actually wakes us up. Our body starts to produce cortisol at around about 5 a.m. in the morning, just before the body is meant to wake up. And it starts to get us going, which is also really important that if you're a coffee drinker, I love my coffee and I don't always abide by this, but we should be waiting for about an hour after we wake up before we have coffee because our natural reserves of cortisol is being produced and coffee actually can prevent that natural rhythm. But it does wake us up in the morning. Cortisol also, our natural cortisol mobilizes glucose so that you have energy to respond to challenges. And this is really, really important to know. So if it mobilizes glucose to give me energy, but then I get a hit of this synthetic cortisone, is that going to disrupt my capacity to be able to perform tasks when they're challenging and to really respond to challenges? And of course, I've already let you know that it initiates healing by sparking what's called the inflammatory cascade. So, when you injure yourself, then cortisol is part of the first response team, creates inflammation, which is uncomfortable, but it's like a signaling for healing to begin. Right, so compare that to the injection. Cortisone is a shot. It's like hitting your whole system. I know that they give it straight right to the area, but it hits your whole system with a sledgehammer. So instead of your body orchestrating a symphony of chemical signals, which is cortisol is part of this orchestra. No one hormone works on its own. Cortisol signals for other things to happen. And it should be kind of an ebbing and flowing and rising and falling. But then when the injection floods that area with an overwhelming artificial dose, there's no rhythm to that. It's not intelligent, and it is certainly not connected to your whole system. There's been a lot of talk about our stress responses, it's actually really great to see, and I noticed this at the Pilates Association conference this year. My talk was based on polyvagal theory, which I've also done a podcast on. If you haven't listened to that already, it's the last episode before this one on the podcast. And I know that I've spoken a lot about stress on the body, the emotions of stress, the emotions of pain. There's a podcast episode that I've done on that because it's such a big part of what we do in Pilates. But in general, stress, the response in the body of stress has been talked about so much more now. It's a bit like the hormone thing. Hormones are a big thing to talk about at the moment, which I think is wonderful. What I love about it is we're starting to understand that our stress responses are beautifully designed when they're rhythmic and time-bound. When we have spikes of cortisol in the morning and then they subside at night, our body thrives. But when cortisol is dysregulated, and that's a dysregulation of cortisol when you have a cortisone injection, like it's too high for too long, or flattened when there's no rhythm, this is when we get sick. So it really makes sense that an artificial blast of cortisone, it doesn't heal the body. It interrupts the body's natural processes. And I really do, like I keep saying, I really do understand why clients line up for these injections, because pain is exhausting. Pain on its own is stressful. It eats into people's sleep. It affects their mood. It affects their work. Pain really can debilitate a relationship. I've worked with people with chronic pain. I've seen marriages come under strain. I've seen people's relationships with their sisters, brothers, with their children come under strain. And I understand that we need to help people when they're in pain. And sometimes when you're feeling like you've been in pain for so long, you are being stretched, and the anti-inflammatories aren't touching anything more. You feel like you're doing your strengthening exercise and it's not helping. Nothing has shifted. But this is where I always come back to one of my core philosophies, and that is pain is your body whispering to you. It's the feedback loop. And if we just silence it with a megaphone, we don't hear the message. We need to feel pain so that we can understand whether or not what we're doing in the body is working well. And the body is always working to bring itself back to homeostasis. If you haven't heard of Carla Stecco, check her out. I'm trying to get her on the podcast. She's always seems to be either busy or on holidays whenever I'm free, but it will happen at some stage. But Carla Stecco is a fascia researcher, and her research shows that tissues adapt beautifully when given variability in load. And this is Pilates. This is our magic sauce, is being variable with the load that we're putting people in. So compared to if somebody is repeatedly stressed in one direction without enough time or variety to recover, the sliding of the surfaces, which ultimately is fascia, gets sticky. And it's this stickiness of the fascia that actually creates inflammation. And it's the inflammation is what you're feeling when you have bursitis. So bursitis is inflammation. Inflammation is a result of sticky fascia. Sticky fascia is a result of repetitive movement in one direction under too much load. Well, what is Pilates? Pilates is multi-directional. Fascia wants you to be multi-directional because fascia is multi-directional. And when fascia is moved in all different directions, under all different types of tension, under all different types of load, so think open chain, closed chain. What's his name? The founder of Polestar, Brent Anderson. I'm pretty sure he coined the term, not open chain or closed chain kinetic, but pseudo open chain kinetics is what Pilates is. Putting your feet in straps, putting your hands in straps, moving multi-directionally every single joint in the body under that pseudo open chain. So it's like freedom of movement, but with a bit of load. This is what fascia likes. This is how we can teach people better mechanics. This is why we are the superstars when it comes to bursitis. So let's have a really good think about, I guess, some Pilates approaches and some natural approaches to working with people with bursitis. Maybe they've had the cortisone injection. That's okay. Like, I would never hound somebody who's chosen to have their cortisone injection. It's their body, their choice, always for everything. My job is to learn from that person. What is their experience like? Why did they choose their experience? What led them there? And how can I help them move forwards in a positive nature? And then I want to educate them on what it is that injection has done to their body, the reality of excess cortisone in the body, but also the plausibility of now working with them in a way so that because they're not in pain, to teach them better mechanics. So what I'm thinking of when it comes to movement variability, and this is key. So instead of hammering the same joint angle, we want to teach people to move in multiple planes. So when it comes to, say, shoulder bursitis, yes, I can see right now that when you're standing and you take your arm as if you're going overhead with the arm, so you're reaching your arm to the stars. When you're standing, I can see that you're incapacitated. I can see that the rhythm of that joint is not allowing for you to take the arm overhead because there's no space between your humerus and your clavicle, and your scapula is stuck. Or, if I want to say it in really simple terms, as you take your arm overhead, you are shrugging the shoulder up around your ears, and it looks like your shoulders are playing earrings. Well, your shoulders should never be earrings. There should be space between the shoulder and the ear, but that is mechanics, and this is what we're trying to fix. But what happens when we lay the person on their back? Where can they take their arm now without feeling pain or without feeling the same restriction? So the beauty of Pilates is we are changing our relationship to gravity. So maybe somebody does not have much mobility in their arm when they're standing, and they certainly cannot get loaded up when they're standing because of the lack of mobility, because of the poor mechanics, because of the pain. But maybe if we lay them down, then gravity plays a different role as far as the mechanics of that joint. So now there's less load on the joint from gravity, and now maybe the person could take their arm overhead just a little bit more. Maybe you could start to play around with load. You always have to be working outside of their pain sphere. So when working with bursitis, we don't want to be doing things that are painful, and the person needs to tell us this, which is a reason that I'm not a big fan of the cortisone injection, because you're no longer feeling with the pain. You actually can't give me that information. But hopefully I've worked with you before you've gotten your cortisone injection, and I've taken note of where you were able to move in a pain-free range, so that I can continue to work on good mechanics within your pain-free range. And then as your mechanics get better, you can start to go further, and then we can start to load up. But we want to be multi-directional with the joint. So not only are we trying to teach above the head, we want to teach out to a T, we want to teach behind the body in all ranges, first with little or no load, and then slowly progressing load over time, but always 100% looking at correct joint placement, good movement patterns, and pain-free ranges. So think hip bursitis. Now, maybe side lying is not available for the person. It's not comfortable if you've got hip bursitis to lay on your side. That's normal. Like, if it's inflamed, don't lay on the side. Some people, they can lay on the side with a cushion, but I'm a little bit like, you know what? If it bothers you, there's so many other things that we can do. So with somebody with hip bursitis, I'm doing standing multi-directional lunges. So I want to practice lunging, so one foot in front of the other. I want to practice lunging with heels off the ground, heels on the ground. I want to practice Pilates first position, so think of all of the foot positions on the foot bar, and practicing them with first knees in straps and then feet in straps. Now, I often work knees in straps first because it shortens the lever. So imagine for a moment that you've got somebody's feet in the straps, and you're teaching them how to do leg circles. But remember, bursitis means that they have poor mechanics or poor joint placement when they're moving. So if that lever is very long, if you imagine, you can see cobwebs up in the corner of your ceiling, and it's a very, very high ceiling. Like, you've got those old school ceilings that are super high. The only way you can reach that ceiling standing on the ground is with a very, very long broomstick. But you find it really hard to reach those cobwebs because the broomstick is so long that you struggle with direction. You struggle to really hone in on the exact position that those cobwebs are. Instead, you might get a chair or a stool and stand on that chair or stool, and it shortens the distance between the cobwebs and what you're holding on to. So it's much easier for you to reach. Or maybe now you can reach that just with a sponge, or just with a little feather duster. Much easier for you to hone in on that position. The exact same is true in the body when we're working with levers, and our levers are our arms and our legs. They're levers, they move us through life, but we use them to reach things. When we shorten the lever, so instead of putting feet in straps and we put knees in straps, exactly the same concept as when you're trying to reach that cobweb and you couldn't when you had a long lever, but you could when you had a short lever. Short lever means better joint placement. So I actually start, instead of feet in straps, we put the strap over the thigh, onto the back of the knee, and we do what's called knees in straps. It's much more effective for getting better joint placement, and that is very, very important. Right. As well as that, so think improving joint placement, we also want to make sure that we're getting stronger in all of the muscles around that joint. So hip bursitis, we're getting stronger, glutes, hamstrings, inner thigh, adductors, abductors, quads, but also those deep core muscles are part of our stabilizers for our people with hip bursitis. Shoulder bursitis, we're thinking scapular mobility. So you could be doing wall slides, closed change weight bearing. You're working towards doing things like quadruped, but I often would start quadruped on the wall. So I'm teaching wall push-ups because, again, we're changing the relationship with gravity. As we take away gravity from the joint, then we can really focus on better joint placement. And then we're making sure that the scapula is moving well. We're making sure that the humerus is sitting like in underneath that acromion process. So the acromion process is like the very edge of your clavicle, and we're making sure that we're moving that arm multi-directionally. So little circles standing, little circles sitting. You can think of starting to work hug a tree, but again, you can change the lever. You can shorten the lever of that joint, and you can put your straps on the elbows instead of the hands. You can work with small hand weights before you start putting the hands in the straps to make sure that you are really working on better joint placement. Of course, similar to hip bursitis, I think I said it, like multi-directional, but also laying on your back is a great way to start adding load. I think I already said that with your shoulder. The second thing, so movement variability is key. Think fascia over muscles. Fascia, joints, tendons, ligaments over muscles. Second one is fascia hydration. Fascia hydration, according to studies, is one of the biggest proponents when it comes to injury. We need to hydrate our fascia. So not only does multi-directional movement keep fascia gliding and sliding, but also does gentle rolling, bouncing, and spiraling. So if you think of like the body is designed to move, think of seaweed rather than a stick, right? We want, imagine being like a piece of seaweed just floating around in the ocean rather than a stick just stuck in the ground. We want people moving all over the place in many, many different ranges. And you can be using things like massage balls. So there's so many different types of massage balls. I love to use the Franklin balls personally. No, I'm not doing a promo for Franklin. But Franklin are great balls. You can use chi balls or what we call Pilates balls these days. There never used to be anything called a Pilates ball, but now there is. You can use foam rollers. There's another foam roller called the melt roller. Melt method is really great. Instead of a foam roller, get foam rollers that are not too hard. And you don't necessarily need to be rolling up and down like a rolling pin. You can just be rolling around on things. I'm not a fan when it comes to fascia of rolling up and down like a rolling pin. That just flattens the fascia out. What we want to try and encourage is this sliding and gliding and changing shape of fascia, which is why massage balls, but not massage balls that are like a golf ball. I'm talking massage balls that have a bit of sponginess in them to allow for the body to melt around that. Obviously, a heck of a lot of water. If fascia is dehydrated, then people need to be drinking water. A lot of people are drinking water, but they're drinking way too much coffee, way too much alcohol, way too much trans fats and sodium. I'm not talking like good salt. I'm talking like bad sodium, like takeaway foods and stuff like that. But a lot of water. And if people are struggling to really get water into their body, so if they're like drinking water and then going to the toilet really quickly, then potentially their cellular level is not taking in the water, you can add like just a couple of sprinkles of table salt, but like think Celtic sea salt or pink sea salt or coarse sea salt, or of course a good hydration salt into the water. It actually helps for the cellular level to take on that water easily. Anti-inflammatory nutrition. So ultimately the cortisone injection is designed as an anti-inflammatory. It's designed to help with that inflammatory process. So think omega-3s, fish, flax, chia, all of your omega-3s. Anti-inflammatory herbs, we're thinking turmeric, ginger, boswellia. Most people can handle those types of things. Turmeric and ginger, you can just get the markets. Cook everything with ginger and turmeric. Cook everything with these types of things. Garlic is a good one as well. A lot of good collagen. So good collagen means collagen that your body can actually take. Now there's a lot of people, some people in the fascia research are now saying that taking too much collagen can actually make your collagen sticky. But if you're doing things like bone broth, then your body will just take on what you need and then it will dispel any of the excess compared to taking a collagen supplement. So natural is always best, as in, where is the collagen coming from? It should be in your food. So think a lot of bone broths. If you're eating meat, it's okay to eat the fat. It's okay if there's collagenous parts in that meat. You don't have to cut it all off. You can eat the whole thing, no problem. Number 4, stress and nervous system regulation. I've already touched on that cortisol is the body's natural response to stress. We need the natural rhythm of cortisol in the body to keep going. Chronic stress means cortisol levels are elevated to the point that we can no longer hold any more cortisol in that cup, and then that equals more inflammation. So people who are highly stressed are going to end up with more inflammation in the body, which also attributes to things like bursitis. So we need to make sure that we're helping our clients regulate their nervous system. I teach a lot of vagus breathing techniques. I've got an episode on vagus breathing. I've got videos on YouTube on vagus breathing. Go and check it out. But teach breath-led Pilates, teach mindfulness and vagal tone exercises. This is definitely one of the tenets of Pilates, the mind, body, and spirit. If we really tap into the mind and the spirit of Pilates, then our clients will have much better self-regulation of their own nervous system, which means that they are not as likely to end up with things like chronic inflammation. So bursitis is one thing, but chronic bursitis, something that just never goes away because you're already so stressed, can be a real problem. Good sleep hygiene is one of the pillars of nervous system regulation. Our tissues recover and repair when we are asleep. There's no other time for our tissues to be recovering because otherwise our tissues are being used all the time. So at least 8 hours of sleep a night is absolutely key. And if you've got space to hold a meditation class in your studio, why not? It's just another option that you're offering people. Think of strength and load in the right dose. So controlled resistance, working around the joint, not avoiding load, but dosing it. So I always say to my clients who have bursitis, I really work on good joint placement. I imagine that if I could see the bones, I'm always imagining taking everything away from the body and just looking at the bones. When you're moving those bones, do they look like they're putting in good place? And could I imagine that there's some space in that joint? So remember, a joint socket is a circular cup that the bone sits in. So think of space between the bone and the circular cup, and then that is good joint movement. And then trying to load that up, but just dosing it. So let's see if you can do 6 reps. Let's see if you can do 10 reps. Let's figure out how many reps is good for you that you can feel the muscles working without causing any pain. So you know what? The Pilates springs are perfect. They're adjustable, they're progressive, there's no jarring. You can help the springs take some of the load so that you can actually teach good joint placement. Once you've used the springs to teach good joint placement, then you can use the springs to add load on. Community. You are part of the healing process for your clients. Healing isn't just chemical, it's emotional. So when a client feels cared for, when they feel safe and connected, their body's healing power, their body's healing pathways naturally switch on. Be the studio that your clients want to come to. Have an aesthetic environment, have the music that is perfect for them, have staff that are always happy and welcoming, nobody walking around with a stick up their butt, nobody's too cool for school. Everybody is loving and caring and empathetic. This is part of our client's pathway to freedom, is oxytocin. Oxytocin, otherwise known as the love hormone. And we produce this love hormone, this feel-good hormone, when we are in community, when we are touching people. If your clients are happy to get hands-on, when I'm working with somebody who is in pain, I always ask them first, of course, and if they're happy with hands-on, they end up craving hands-on. So I will do things like put my hand on their leg firmly, let them know that I'm there, put my hands around their rib cage, get them to breathe into your hands, hold their shoulder in a way that feels like it's giving them support and comfort and some control. Touch is absolutely key if somebody is happy for you to touch them. And of course, I know that I get really narky about, you go to the GP and you just get this bloody injection and it's not what you need. But ultimately, collaborative care is really, really important. I'm very careful who I send people to. I vet people before I send my clients to them. So I see the osteopath, the integrative doctor, the naturopath, the women's health physio, the masseuse. I see those people myself before I send my clients to them, so that then I can start to vet other practitioners for my clients. I know my clients, so I generally know what type of person they want to see. And I can discuss that with my clients. When you go and see this person, this is their approach. I think that you'd really benefit really well from that. This person is really good at what they do. They have a little bit of a funny bed manner. I give them a heads up. So then my client feels really supported. They come to me as the expert to help them move forwards. Be that person. And you know what? Ultimately, I want to reframe bursitis as being the problem to being the messenger. Your body is not broken. Your client's body is not broken. Your client's body is asking for change. So be the person that helps them find the change so that they can have longevity, so that they can be happy, so that they can take control of their own health, and so that they can have the freedom to move with joy. This is our job as Pilates practitioners, Pilates professionals. So please, less repetition, more variation. Don't be scared to vary what you're doing in consideration of what this client has. And please, less silencing and more listening. I really try and spend a lot of time listening to what it is that my client needs. And you know what? I'm not a psychologist. I do not want to hear every single bit of how my client's feeling when they come into the studio. And in fact, I work very hard to very quickly, when I ask a client how they are and they start to tell me what sounds like it's going to be a 20-minute story, I very quickly turn that around into let's get your body moving and let's see how you feel, because sometimes people can get stuck in telling their story. So I'm an active listener, but I'm also a leader. And I'm leading my client towards moving better. So it's very important to find that happy balance. So ultimately, today we've unpacked what bursitis is, what cortisone injections really do, and how our own natural cortisol works very differently to synthetic cortisone. We've looked at why quick fixes often fail, and what natural fascia-focused, movement-based approaches can create with long-term healing and just better movement in general. So if you're dealing with bursitis yourself, if you're working with clients who are dealing with bursitis, please know this, my friends. The body is not weak. The body is wise. Pain is not a punishment. It does not need to be silenced. It is feedback that needs to be listened to. And there is so much that we can do to support the healing without relying on quick fixes that create bigger issues down the track. We are looking for longevity with health, not quick fixes that end up ruining joints. Now listen up. If you loved this episode, I'd love for you to share it with a colleague or a client who might be facing the injection decision. Ultimately, I want people to have a choice, but an educated decision must be made when we are taking these types of actions in our body. And if you want more resources, please join me in the Pilates Muse newsletter, where I share my insights in written formats, and go and check out my blogs on the website, thepilatesprofessional.com.au. Now, you know, my name's Katie Crane. I am the Pilates Professional. Thank you so much for joining me in the Pilates Lounge studio today. I am thrilled to be back, and today has really filled my heart. I haven't been here for so long, and I'm sitting at my desk looking out the window. There's been a couple of kookaburras in the trees, and I'm sitting here watching wildlife. I've got a story to tell you in the next few weeks. I'm just not quite ready to divulge exactly what's been going on outside of the podcast, but why I haven't been here. But as I climb out of the depth of what has been going on, and I can create more time for you here, slowly, I will start to share my journey with you, because I know that my trials and tribulations can be part of your growth. Thank you so much for joining me. I cannot wait to bring another episode to you. Stay tuned. Have a great week. Keep moving. Go and see your clients. They love you. You are needed. Goodness me, that's been an hour already. I gotta go. See you soon.